Okay, friends, it's time for story time. So I was recently asked to go babysitting, which required me to fly out to Denver, Colorado, the land of the Fruit Loops, and I was tasked with watching a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old for a few days while the parents were away. While it was a ton of fun and I learned lots of things about small children, there was one moment that highlighted human nature for me, I would say, and I wanted to share it with you guys. So we were at Denver City Park, which, by the way, the Denver parks are absolutely lovely, and I can definitely see the appeal of why people would want to live in the Mile High City. But me and the 5-year-old boy are walking along this path right here, and you can see that there's the occasional hop in the concrete. I don't think you can see my mouse. I'm on the pavement and he's on this elevated concrete barrier. And occasionally there's this little hop that he has to go over, right? So he's enthusiastically walking around like he owns the world, right? As any 5-year-old boy would. And when he's balancing along this thing, he's jumping very enthusiastically over it. And even though his balance is fine, it just takes 1 second for him to really hurt himself, you know? One bad step and he could fall and hit his head or whatever. So while he's parading around and having fun, I'm also trying to make sure he doesn't kill himself, right? Because small children love to do things that'll try to get themselves killed, right? So we're walking along, right? And we're starting to approach this family that's all gathered around sitting on the concrete block, right? So he's gonna have to get down so that we can go around them, right? From what I remember, there was like 4 adults and 3 children of their own. And one of them was also about 5 years old. And he's balancing himself on the thing too and having a grand old time. Now, as my 5-year-old gets down and we start walking around the family, the 5-year-old that's dancing around and doing the balance act near all the adults with the other family falls down, hurts himself, starts crying in pain, and the adults flock to him to see if he's okay. Now, my 5-year-old, and you can't make this up, this was like literally right in front of us as we were walking by, right? 5-year-old that was with me definitely saw this. But here's the crazy part. Even though he saw that kid probably hurt himself and he was in pain, he didn't really connect the dots to be like, gee, maybe I shouldn't be doing this so aggressively and dancing around like I own the world on this balancing thing, because even though it's fun, it takes one bad step or one misstep to the point where I could end up like that kid. But we continued along, and while he wasn't jumping up and down all the time, he still wanted to do it just to do it, right? So people in society, right? We typically act in ways where if we don't see the consequences of what we do, then we're just going to do the bad activity, right? And once we see the bad consequences of what we do, then we'll probably stop, right? Because that's what a rational person would do, right? But much like this 5-year-old, people in society continue to do really dumb fucking things, right? Even though they know what the consequences are. So this 5-year-old is still playing along the thing. I'm watching him very closely, of course. But what obviously did not register in his head is, oh man, if I eat shit like that, I could end up kind of injured and it would hurt, right? So maybe I need to be really, really careful at all times, right? And he's a smart enough aware kid. But just because you show someone the consequences of their actions doesn't mean they're gonna stop, right? Think about people who text and drive or are on their phone when they're driving, right? First of all, it's fucking terrible for the flow of traffic because now you're distracted and you're causing the other 6 or 7 people behind you to be really fucking pissed off about why things aren't moving, right? But also, just like when you're balancing yourself along like the 5-year-old was, it just takes one small misstep when you're driving to have a really, really serious life-altering accident. And yet people continue to choose to text and drive. I mean, this is just like a stereotypical example, but typically I was just like, oh, okay, so these people don't think they're going to be into accidents, and whatever the immediate gratification is way, way, way more important than thinking about like, this could be really damaging in the long term and I shouldn't do it because the cost would just be so high the one time it happens, right? So basically the people that text and drive, right? And I'm not saying you can't text at a fucking Texas red light, because these red lights are fucking like 10 minutes, right? But certainly while your car is moving, do not fucking be on your phone, right? Because not only are you going to be distracted, you could also fucking kill someone else, right? Like, just don't text and drive, right? That's the one example I'm going to beat to death here, but there are serious consequences to the actions that people have, right? So I'm not saying that you can't show children the consequences of certain actions and it's not going to register in their head, right? For example, if I burn my hand on a stove, a child's going to be pretty confused if he's directly looking at me, giving me his full attention, and I start going, shit, fuck, right, with my hand because I put it on a stove. So a child will be confused and it'll probably register in their head not to do it. One would think, right? However, they might have to do it themselves before it really registers in their head like, oh shit, that's really fucking hot and can give me burns. So when we go back to the texting and driving example, right? What are the types of people that don't learn from that and are still going to do it anyway, even though they know the consequences, right? Because once you're an adult and you're driving, you're going to have a mature enough brain to know the consequences of certain actions, right? Unlike children. However, in children, we see that just because you show them something, they're not going to understand it necessarily. So when it comes to like texting and driving or scrolling on Instagram while driving, the types of people who still do that basically have the brains of like 5-year-olds, right? Or they have such extreme dopamine dysfunction that they know what's going to happen, or they know what could happen, and they still do it anyway because they're so addicted to the immediate instant gratification that our phones provide. So going back to my babysitting example, this kid was enthusiastic with playing on this concrete slab. Obviously, he could have hurt himself with a poor step, and nothing was going to stop him from playing. And this is the difference between children and adults, right? Or at least normal adults, is that other kid literally ate shit in front of this 5-year-old that I was babysitting, and that did not register register in his head that, hey, this could really happen to me, and this is the consequence of what could happen if I really screwed this up, right? So maybe I shouldn't be playing around on an elevated surface when I'm a frail little 5-year-old, you know? Now, I'm never going to be a helicopter parent that says, don't ever get up there, right? I just found it fascinating that this kid literally saw the consequence of his action in front of him, this kid eating shit, and all the adults crowding around him like, oh my God, are you okay? And then my 5-year-old walking along like nothing happened, and then continuing to go about his day as if it didn't register in his head, you know? So when we're in society at large and we're talking about problems, right? Things that are really obvious to maybe you and me, because the average viewer on this channel is going to be more in tune with reality than a lot of the other public. What you and I may be able to see as like the consequences of certain actions, whether it be spending shitloads of money on public education, whether it be spending shitloads of money on welfare, whether it be spending shitloads of money on this, shitloads of money on that, right? We're able to see the consequences of those actions, right? And what the other side may never be able to identify with, because the consequences of those actions don't actually register in their brains, very similar to the way that the 5-year-old saw the kid eat shit and went right back up on the concrete railing as if nothing had happened. It's like almost one and the same, right? The consequences of spending shitloads of money and people not seeing that we have to actually tax people and raise those taxes, which is essentially just voting to tax yourself most of the time, sails right over their heads just like a 5-year-old. And it's even harder to convince and show people this because there's not like a giant concrete slab that people are going to fall face first into that they can easily able to connect the dots in their head. When you just assume that, oh, there's this giant pool of money, the government has an infinite amount of money, there's an infinite amount of resources, and the problem can be solved by just spending our way out of it. It's like, no, the government doesn't make money, otherwise we wouldn't have to tax you, right? So therefore the government is very limited. So if we keep voting to keep spending money, then that money has to come from somewhere, and it's usually the people who are going to get taxed, or at least the ones that are productive and making money, that fund the welfare programs, right? Anyway, I'm not saying it's not possible to convince these people, but it's the equivalent of showing a 5-year-old what can happen if another kid eats shit right in front of them, and then they're still going to go about it as if that didn't happen. And that is a physical event that a 5-year-old can tangibly draw in front of them, right? Now try to get them to comprehend the idea that the government doesn't have an infinite amount of resources, that the government actually has to get money from the people which it taxes, and that you and I are going to be the taxpayer and going to be really pissed off when it goes towards a program that you don't have any interest in, right? Like, we have the government, we have taxes, here's a program that I don't want to fund. Like, if someone went up to you and said, hey, can I have $4,000 to go spend on this local charity? You would be like, no, I want to spend my money on something else. Trying to get people to connect those like 4 different trains of thought and put it into one tangible idea, which is the government does not have an infinite amount of resources, is the equivalent of trying to get a 5-year-old to comprehend that, yes, you can eat shit and it could really, really hurt you, and you can't take it back because once you're hurt, you're hurt. And we're trying to prevent you from getting hurt, but the 5-year-old doesn't see that. The 5-year-old didn't even comprehend that it happened like that, you know? Because he's an innocent little 5-year-old who doesn't know much better, and his brain just isn't that developed yet. Anyway, that was an instructive moment I had, because I haven't been around kids in forever, and watching that live was just like, oh my God, that didn't register in his head whatsoever, you know? This is what it's like trying to explain to people that texting and driving is terrible. And once you have damage that's done, you can't take it back. Once you lose an arm, that arm isn't coming back. So the decision you make to drive recklessly is much more dangerous and has consequences that you might not be able to see immediately in the right now until it happens, and then by then it's way too late, you know?